Welcome, and welcome back to the Metropolitan Virtual Playhouse. And welcome to Metropolitan Playhouse Actual. I'm Alex Rowe, Artistic Director of the theater, and I'm sitting in the theater's backstage office. This is it, our windows, East 4th Street behind me, the famous itinerant plant over my head, Patty Kelly's lovely stained glass donation after we featured her in one of our Alphabet City monologues. After a year and a half of broadcasting from my apartment, I can say it's good to be home. It is much the same here at the Playhouse, but in many ways different, of course. We have new air purifiers and air filters and all increased ventilation. We all take semi-weekly COVID tests. We're rehearsing with masks on, and we're all vaccinated, of course. Most meaningfully, based on the experience of being away, one can feel a renewed commitment to the generous collaboration and support of one another that can make a theatrical production truly joyous, certainly for the artist involved, but crucially, for the audience. More than ever, that coming together to wield the sleight of hand of theatrical production, to manufacture a simulacrum of the world on our small stage, to don the costumes and then the roles of fictional characters, all of this in service to tell stories to a group of friends or strangers who are playing their attentive part in the audience. It's an affirmation of care about and concern for our neighbors, whomever they may be, whatever may be their beliefs, whether they are near, or as in the case of some of you, very far. Whether on screen or on stage, being a part of Metropolitan is to us a very small way of loving one another. I want to take you back to March 12th, 2020, when the cast gathered to put the final touches on our second show of our 28th season, D.W. Gregory's Radium Girls, a beautifully written play by a gifted and winning author who joined us and edited the play somewhat for our production. It's a fast-moving tale of industrial miscreants and ultimate justice, contemporary, as it was written in 2021, but about a sketchily known period of American history, not certainly entirely unknown. The nonfiction bestseller Radium Girls by Kate Moore brought it to many people's attention. There was a film in the works, which actually debuted during the pandemic, also called Radium Girls. These Shining Lives is a play by Melanie Marnick. And our version, Radium Girls by D.W. Gregory, played around the country, but never before in New York. We were delighted to give it its New York premiere. What is the play about? Well, in the 1920s, the fad for radium provided a veritable gold mine for many in the industry. Cosmetics, paints, tonics, disinfectants. You could even buy radium toothpaste and radium-infused butter for a while, all resulting from Marie and Pierre Curie's 19th century discovery. One popular application, which had been developed through its use in World War I, was the painting of illuminated watch and instrument dials. As many as 4,000 workers in the US and Canada were hired to paint dials, completely oblivious to the delayed, irreversible, and devastating effects of being exposed to the radioactive material. Ironically, the most skilled painters were young women and girls whose small hands could do the delicate work. The best workers were the most vulnerable. They worked with a dangerous element. They ingested it as part of that work in the way that they pointed the paintbrushes to apply the dials. And when painful illnesses and loss of bone overtook them, employers at first denied any connection between the work and the employees' afflictions. Only after legal challenges that spun on for years and even decades in some cases, was a connection for the work at the factories and the actual illness acknowledged, and companies held to some sort of long-delayed account. Radium Girls, the play, tells a fictionalized but entirely fact-based story of one girl and some of her friends, Grace Fryer, fighting for recognition and justice against the president and CEO of US Radium. The play also tells of his conflicted sense of his conflicted duties as he slowly recognizes his livelihood is partly built on the poisoning of his employees. And when we did the publicity for the play back in 2020, my notes touched on the corporate drive for profits over community health, environmental depredations, nutritional choices of some suspicion, the notion of fads, such as the fad for radium, social media addictions, which in some ways seem connected to the popularization of a dangerous, out of control discovery, technological encroachments on personal safety and privacy, financial speculations, and of course, even garden variety misogyny as the young girls were ignored. Since then, we've experienced the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We've witnessed the brutal killing of George Floyd. We've witnessed elections here and abroad that brought new surprises to us. Radium Girls, for all the reasons above, and for these as well, seems only all the more pertinent in 2021. For our production, we have lost some on the way whose other commitments could not permit them to rejoin the cast and the crew, and I want to give a special thanks to Adam Bradley, Teresa Kelsey, Holly Gould, and Ashley J. Nikas for helping pave the way. But of course, a thanks also to those who have been able to rejoin and newly join the cast and crew of our production of Radium Girls. Tonight, it is a great pleasure to welcome to the virtual stage director Laura Livingston, actor Kyle Maxwell, a member of the original cast who plays several roles in the production, and Olivia Killingsworth, a longtime Metropolitan collaborator who joins us anew and takes on one of the central roles, that of Grace Fryer. Artists, welcome to the Metropolitan Virtual Playhouse. It'll be my pleasure to let you introduce yourselves. And I wonder, as you do, if you might tell us a little bit what I think numbers want to know. What did you do during your pandemic vacation? What's been going on for the last year and a half for you? Laura?
Yep, I'm Laura Livingston, and I'm the director of Radium Girls. And Radium Girls, we decided to close it 2 days before we were going into tech back in March in 2020. And since that time in theater, I have directed some virtual playhouse pieces for the Metropolitan Playhouse, which has been a very interesting journey. One of them, Kyle was in, and did some online shows with my improv company, an online writing show. And generally, I think just tried not to go totally insane. Trying to keep in touch, you know, of course, with people that you couldn't be with, and just working to keep in touch.
Hey, Kyle, as you've been name checked, Kyle Maxwell playing numerous roles in the play. How did you spend?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Kyle Maxwell. I play Tom Kreider. I play Raymond Berry. I play Dr. Joseph Neff. I play the reporter. I was in the original company that was pretty close to putting this up in March of 2020. And I'm so happy to be back. I've been waiting to sort of finish the job, so to speak, especially with Laura and I and all the people that had a chance to do it. It's sort of been a really exciting thing to come back to. I spent the pandemic quitting my survival job, returning to said survival job because the pandemic went along a lot longer than I thought it would. I finished writing a play. I started writing another play. I did a bunch of Zoom theater, some of which with the Metropolitan, which was a godsend because it was starting to be where you're like, are we actors? What are we doing? And then I got married. So I was a bachelor the last time we did the show, and now I'm married. So I think that's probably the thing I'm supposed to mention the most, especially since my wife will probably see this. So yeah, that's how I spent it. And I'm just super excited to be back.
Hey, congratulations. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And last but certainly not least, yet she is the rookie to this particular production, Olivia Killingsworth.
Hi, I'm Olivia Killingsworth, and I I'm so happy to be joining this cast. I was aware of the show when it was originally going to go up in March of 2020. And I was really excited about it. I was planning to come see it. I was so sad for them when they had to close. And then when the opportunity came up to join the cast, I mean, I jumped on it because I had been busy with other stuff and wasn't able to be a part of it and come audition. And so it was almost like, you get a second chance. come see if it works. And it did. So I'm really glad to be jumping in. I spent my pandemic very much in the same way that Laura did, trying not to go crazy. I stayed shut up in my apartment in New York, and I had just adopted 2 kittens right before the pandemic started. And so the 2 of them and I got to really know each other, and they may wander through the shot because they expect their dinner any minute now. So yeah, that's what, and I did some Zoom theater. I participated in some Metropolitan Virtual Playhouse, which was fun, and did some other stuff on Zoom. And just, I lived a lot of my life on Zoom for a while, and I'm so happy to come out of our little boxes and into the world.
Well, it's a delight to welcome Olivia to the cast. As sorry as we are to bid farewell to the friends who helped us put the show in motion to begin with, we are also just blessed to welcome the newcomers to the cast. They're doing a tremendous job in stepping right in. And I'm glad Olivia's here to speak to that experience. And this is a part of the next thing I wanted to address. For those of you who are returning, I wonder what it's like to come back to a show affected by 2 things. One, time off at all. We're coming back to it almost a year and a half after we had rehearsed it to the point almost of presentation. But second to that, what have the events of the past year been like for you in terms of how they affect coming back to be rehearsing a play or this play, which we can talk a little bit more later on?
I would say that, to start just very simply from the very beginning for me, when we came into the theater to rehearse, and I was not paying a lot of attention to what was going on beyond the rehearsal. I found this to be a very demanding play technically to work on. So when I wasn't in rehearsal working, I was trying to prepare all these set changes and everything. And so I came in expecting to rehearse that night, and instead we had a large meeting, and we ended up deciding 3 days before we would have been required to postpone, or we thought maybe even cancel. And I felt like the character in the play who runs the dial painting studio and the business that's using radium now for medical things. I felt like him in that he just can't believe that what he's doing is a health hazard. He just can't believe it, and sidesteps doing anything about it. And I kind of really felt like him that night. I thought, I can't believe that we're going to shut this play down. I almost just can't believe it. And I might have fought it had I not been directing this play, where it's right in front of me, how terrible that is to just deny this, up till now, just something that had never, ever happened before.
And that day that we did that was the strangest. I hope it will remain the strangest day of my career. I really hope nothing ever tops it, because it wouldn't be good if it did. When we walked into the theater that night, I think call was like 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and we walk in and everyone gets the same notification on their phone if they were following Broadway World. We all got the same exact like text, Twitter, boop, 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 boop. And we all saw that all these big shows had gone dark that night that were already in production. And we're all looking at each other like, what are we, should we bring it up? We're going to have a meeting. We don't know what this meeting's about. Everyone was playing catch up because it's something no one has ever done. None of us, nobody. And when we walked away that night, I have to say, I didn't know what was going to happen, right? I didn't know. But as the months went on, I don't know that I thought I'd ever come back to it. Not because I didn't believe in the faith of the theater. I just thought that the theater would just start a fresh season. Like, even though you'd all mentioned it, we would email, and Alex was so positive. He's like, we're going to try as best we can when we can do it. I just remember thinking, enough time's going to go by. Maybe we'll just do a new season and I'll audition for something there. I was excited to see you in a different production, or maybe get another part or something. And when I came back in for my costume fitting a few weeks ago, my shoes were in the same spot. And my name was still in masking tape beneath them. And David's quick change instructions are still taped to the wall. He didn't retape them. That's they've been there. It's like the theater was waiting for us in some really powerful way.
For me, I'm coming back after not just obviously what we've all been through, the pandemic, but for about a year and a few months prior to the pandemic, I had also not really been working a whole lot because I experienced a death in my family in late 2018. And it kind of took me out of commission for quite a long while. And I was kind of looking forward to starting to get back into things when the pandemic happened. So, you know, most of the theater world's been on a break for a year and a half. I've been on a break for almost 3 years. I'm really happy to be back. Coming back and coming into something that folks have already worked on is really exciting in a way, because there's so much work, and there's so much work that's already happened. There's so much of a scaffolding that's already been built, that it's like I can just like climb right on into it. You know, it's like the things are already running and I can like hop right in. This first week of rehearsal has been one of the most intense first weeks of rehearsal I've ever experienced, but in a good way. There's been so much work and ground that's been covered. And I'm really excited to keep moving forward, because now it's like, okay, we've sort of rebuilt what scaffolding we can remember and put in some new bricks here and there. And now we have a skeleton, and let's start to flesh this thing out.
I'm thinking of moving the theater to Russia, where we could rehearse all our plays for 2 years before we put them on. But that it sort of messes with the mission a little bit, and maybe some of our loyal audience. Laura, you spoke, gave a great illustration of what it was like to stop, which was a surprise to all of us that night. But what has it been like to come back for you, reapproaching a play that you had worked on and then put aside for some time?
I was really uneasy for a while. When Alex would say, what if we got this going again? I would say, fine, if we have the same stage manager, because the play has 26 set changes, and at the Metropolitan, that means 26 little bits of moving the story forward that are basically choreography, only with a real technical spine to it. And then that it's not really written down all that well. We would make up these set changes and piece them together. And but then I would say, in my script, I'd have like A and an arrow. And I'd think, is that a character's name A, or is that an actor's name A? Who is that? How do we find this out? And we did not have the same stage manager. We had a stage manager who had to jump onto the moving train, and she's done an incredible job. And it's just really interesting. It was almost, like some folkloric event or something, where the cast would go, I remember that I went over here. I remember that I moved this. And I would look at the script and go, why did I have them do that? And then they do it, and we'd all go like, oh, that's why. It would suddenly become clear that there was a purpose behind it, and these ideas made sense. And so in that way of finding your shoes, Kyle, and it was waiting for you, I felt like the nonverbal parts of the play that we had put together were kind of waiting to be rediscovered.
Certainly encouraging to think that our work in the past actually had some reason and some wit and inspiration behind it that we can rediscover. I know I've talked to some of the actors also about the satisfaction of being able to make choices anew as well, looking at something and saying, oh, now that I think about it, this is possible, because there's not the pressure of we have to get it up by the deadline that you had a year and a half ago. Kyle, you're nodding. Does that seem familiar, that experience?
Absolutely. Just by chance, my life at the time we were running this last time was a kind of like a runaway train, not in a bad way, but it just, there was a lot of energy propelling me right into the production. And not that I was doing a bad job or was even struggling, but I never felt like I had my feet on the floor. I just was moving really quickly with a lot of things in my personal life. Everything was kind of just in a turnover. And I remember probably a couple weeks after we shut down, when we were in that real lockdown in New York, where it was really nothing was happening and you just had time to sit and think. And I remember thinking, if I ever do get a chance to go back there to that role, and specifically to Tom, the character, I think I'm going to just try as best I can to take a moment each rehearsal and just be happy that I'm here. We had a really fun moment in rehearsal between two acts, between myself and Kelly, who plays Arthur Reeder. He was holding a piece of paper. I don't know if you overheard, Laura. It was the other day. It was just the last day we rehearsed. And we were doing the courtroom scene. No spoilers for the story for anyone who sees this before the play, but there's a courtroom scene. And he had a piece of paper in his hand and he said, "Do you remember this piece of paper?" And I said, "No, I don't." He goes, "You and I fought about this piece of paper." And I said, "I don't think we did." And he said, "No, we did." He said, "I wanted you to take this from me and you refused." And I said, "Why would I refuse?" And then he described the reasons. And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm refusing again." I said, I think I completely stand by that action choice I made 16, 18 months ago.
Another thing that I find interesting about coming back kind of in this sort of, we're hoping post-pandemic soon era, or is dealing with the pandemic in doing this. And just how do you rehearse when you've got 26 fast moving scenes and different characters are coming in and out, but you want to only call figure out ways that you can have people come into rehearsal and leave or not come in, or how do you make a schedule, bearing in mind that you don't want to get someone on a subway and have them sit in a theater and do one scene and then go home just because that's where it happened in the play. And the other thing, that's kind of, I find that a little trying to deal with and difficult to deal with. And I am concerned about the cast having a sense of through line when they're jumping around, just doing the scenes because of the group of people that we've called in. But trying to be less crowded on stage and in a use a smaller amount of the stage, because we want to make sure the audience knows that we're away from them. So we've actually, lopped off some acreage of the stage so that there is a no man's land. And also there were some crowd scenes in this show, and we're not putting a crowd on stage. We're figuring out how to do that anyway. And there have been some instances where that it is required a paring down, a simplifying, which I always feel is very hard to get to simple because you're trying to get to the essence. And, people are far apart and there's fewer of them on stage, and we do it like this and we all go like, should have done that from the beginning. That's the best way to do it. This working within the parameters made us like narrow it down and make it better.
I love this insight into the kind of nuts and bolts, making the sausage, as it were, of what it's like to be in the theater together and working on it again. And we haven't even mentioned the fact that everybody's rehearsing with masks on their faces. It's a good thing. My teacher friends tell me how hard it is to hear their students, but at least we're all practiced in projecting. The cast, I should reassure the audience, has been a marvel of accommodation and generosity in dealing with the protocols to keep us safe, because we all want to get to opening, we all want to get to closing, we all want to make it happen. I want to think a little bit about the story, and this is the dread word, relevance. I feel that every play we do at Metropolitan is relevant to today, or we really wouldn't want to do it. So here's a play that was written 21 years ago in 2000. It takes place 70 years ago in the 20s. Would anyone like to share any thoughts about how either the way that it's written or the story itself bears on us today, either on its own or particularly in light of the last year and a half, if that's changed for you also?
I was doing some more reading today. I was watching another little mini documentary today, just like about the story, trying to refresh like the research I had done a long time ago. And I was taken by the fact that I was a history major in my sort of early undergrad years. And I find the age we live in today be the second age of robber barons in America, the second age of sort of wanton greed and celebrated greed. And we throw workers under the bus like nobody's business. And we throw women under the bus 10 times worse. And there's a line in the play, and I won't say what it is, but it came up again in the documentary about the disparity between how men are treated and how women are treated in relation very specifically to this story and the safety measures that were in place. And the way it was phrased in the documentary, though I'm in the scene that line occurs in, seeing it as a bystander, as a viewer, removed, not working, it made me cry because of the thought of it, the thought of the callous indifference to the life of a woman, which is such a commonality in our society that it just doesn't matter to these people who make this money at this level. They don't care whose bones get ground up. And we can't ever, ever, ever let them forget these things that have happened, because they'll just happen again.
I think it's so relevant what Kyle mentions about especially women, given that the brunt of the job losses in the pandemic and most of the people who left the workforce and still have yet to come back are women. This idea of, a certain congressman saying we should gut Osha, that because now Osha has been tasked with enforcing these, vaccine mandates on employers with more than 100 workers. And it's like, there isn't, as Kyle said, unless we keep telling the stories, there is not enough of a collective memory and an understanding of why we have a thing like Osha. Why does Osha exist? I think we're in a period now, or we were at the start of the pandemic, of workers not having as much power and not having as many rights. We have been a steady kind of disintegration of labor power in the past, 30 to 40 years in America. But what's interesting and exciting to me is that lately we've seen kind of a resurgence. We've seen the Fight for 15, we've seen people go on strike and the election in Bessemer, Alabama, and one that's happening in our own industry, IATSE. And, there's all of these rumblings now, and even in non-organized labor, there are certain aspects. There are workers now who are able to say, no, I don't want to come back to this job, which now puts me at increased risk, unless you provide, adequate pay, unless you provide these kind of benefits, etc. So there's like this reawakening almost.
I would like to say that I think the play is quite balanced. It's not like a manifesto. I think it really shows how hard it was to be the employer. He seemed to me to be quite unsupported in ways that to be quite unsupported by regulations. I think a lot of times regulations are supported. Why was he ever allowed to to base his career on this dangerous substance? Because there was no testing required. He had no idea, so he invests his future and the well-being of his family in something that he should never have done. And he is a person who thinks of himself as a good person and wants to do good and wants to help the girls. And then he is in a position where he would have to, just out of the goodness of his heart, bankrupt himself and destroy his daughter's future. And again, I think like in this time of pandemic, when you're in a position like Alex and I are, where we're basically, I'm kind of the boss of the rehearsal in a certain way, and Alex is the employer, but we're not against the people who are working there. We want them to be well, and it's great to be required to watch certain videos to figure out how we do it. We don't have to make that all up ourselves.
I think it's also relevant to our time, regardless of pandemic, because we are so divided, right? And it's very easy to other and to just assume the worst of others and to just make everybody, into two-dimensional villains, when, as you say, there are legit concerns on the other side. And there are, corporations are made up of human beings trying to do stuff. And some of the problems we have is that there are incentive structures that incentivize them to do the wrong things and harmful things. But I think it's so interesting to deal with a play like this, where we get to see all of those different sides of the thing.
So these are such illuminating reflections on the meaning of the play now. I want to ask you, for this, our first production back in the theater, have you all a hope for what the audience and the company may take from joining us at the production?
I have been very aware of the fact that this play is based on real people. And I have been happy to know them and been very impressed with what they did. Having not a lot of background to face this kind of struggle and being in physical ill health. And I would like for the audience or people who come to see it, to know these people, to at least know this story, because they were real and it really happened.
It got shared a bunch because obviously in the last year and a half, we've all lost people and we've all known people that aren't here anymore. And this passage was shared between myself and some friends in a group about that the last time someone says your name on earth is really when you die. That you don't die if people remember you. You don't die if who you are lives on in them. It sounds cheesy. It sounds like something we tell children when people die, just to make it easier. But it's actually true that's really when you're gone, is when there's no one left to remember you or tell your story. And I'm blown away by how strong they were. When I read the court transcripts and I read back the things they were willing to do in back braces and with tumors the size of footballs on their legs and they walked in. Like that says something about the soul of a person. And those people aren't gone because we get to tell their story.
I think it's appropriate that we are opening the weekend of Halloween, which also happens to be the weekend of El Dia de los Muertos in Mexican culture, which is the day that we literally remember the dead and remember that they are still with us as long as we say their names and tell their stories. And so I'm really looking forward. That's my hope too, is to call them into the room with us to help keep their stories alive, keep their names alive, and pass that spirit on to everybody who's coming in, who's coming back to the theater after so long.
I want to thank Laura, Olivia, and Kyle for joining me. And I want to thank you, wherever you may be and whenever you may be seeing this, for joining us in celebration of our return to Metropolitan Playhouse, live and in person with D.W. Gregory's Radium Girls. The play runs October 28th through November 21st, 2021. It's a limited run of only 16 performances. I hope if you're in the area, you will be able to join us. Do remember, vaccination proof is required and masks must be worn at all times in the building. For more information, visit our website, www.metropolitanplayhouse.org. And remember, be well, stay safe, and in this time of seemingly increasing division, love one another. Here's a final thanks to all those who have supported us through our virtual venture right up to the present.